The courtroom was silent, not with order but with fear, the kind of thick tension that made even the judge hesitate before speaking. Then, like a scene out of a slow-burning nightmare, the woman walked in, heels clicking against the marble floor with a calm that didn't match the chaos she carried in her hands. She walked past the gallery without a glance, past the guards without a word, and stopped in front of the judge's bench with a single object, a thick envelope stained red at the corners. She dropped it hard, the thud echoing like a gunshot. "That's his signature," she said, voice steady but sharp as a blade. "It proves everything." Every eye in the room turned to the man in the defendant's chair, Darren Cole, once the billionaire darling of the tech world, now hollow-eyed and pale, his hands twitching as though they no longer belonged to him. His mouth parted slightly, but no words came. Because what she'd just handed over, the blood-stained letter, wasn't a threat. It was a confession. And it was signed by someone they all knew had died 6 months earlier. Lucas Hale. Darren's best friend. His business partner. The man who had dared him to marry her. 3 nights before, the game had been simple. The two of them sat in their usual booth at the top floor of Belvedere's, the kind of restaurant where your steak came with a 5-figure bill and your privacy cost more. Lucas poured himself a third drink, that familiar glint of provocation in his eyes. "You couldn't last a month with someone who doesn't need you for your money," he said. Darren laughed without humor, and Lucas leaned in, dropping his voice low, "Marry the next waitress who walks up to this table and prove me wrong." It was a taunt dressed as a dare, and Darren was too full of pride and vodka to walk away. They shook hands across the table, and just as fate would script it, Maya stepped into their world. She had tired eyes, a name tag pinned to a faded uniform, and a tone so unaffected it disarmed them both. "Refill?" she asked, holding the coffee pot like it was the last honest thing in the room. Lucas chuckled. Perfect timing. Darren looked at her, really looked, and something sharp twisted inside him, curiosity, maybe, or instinct pretending to be intrigue. A week later, they were married in Las Vegas. She wore a second-hand wedding dress that didn't fit quite right and didn't seem to care. He wore a tailored tux he didn't bother ironing. The chapel smelled like cigarette smoke and desperation. When they exchanged vows, Maya didn't smile. Not with her eyes. Not even with her lips. And Darren thought, this will be easy. A month, a few photos for the press, and done. He'd win. Lucas would pay up. Another story for the vault. But by week 2, things started to shift. Maya didn't want the spotlight. She refused interviews, deflected attention, and spent most of her time volunteering at an animal shelter downtown. She didn't gush over his money or his sleek penthouse. She asked questions Darren had never been asked. About his mother. About what kept him awake at night. About why he built an empire only to seem so hollow inside. Darren didn't have answers. One night, he found her in the guest bedroom, not the master, crying quietly into a pillow, a photo clutched in her hand. A young man, maybe mid-20s, with a scar down the side of his face. "My brother," she said, "nothing else." She never brought him up again. Week 3, Darren's assistant delivered a sealed manila envelope, no return address. Inside were photographs, grainy but clear enough to see Maya, meeting with a man in a gray hoodie behind a coffee shop, receiving a small box, wiring money. There were time stamps, bank statements, even surveillance shots. Darren's stomach turned. Was she scamming him? Had Lucas put her up to this? Was he the fool again? That night, he stormed into the kitchen where Maya stood slicing fruit. She looked up at him, knife paused mid-air. "You think you're the only one who lies, Darren?" she asked, and set the blade down. "I knew about the bet before you ever opened your mouth." He froze. She stepped past him and pulled a phone from her purse. "Press play," she said, handing it to him. The screen lit up. A video. Lucas. Sitting in a dark room. "If you're watching this, it means I'm dead," he said, his tone far too calm for what followed, "and if I'm dead, it means Darren killed me, or Maya did. Or maybe both of you." Darren staggered back. Maya didn't flinch. The video continued, Lucas's face bloodied now, a close-up on the scar he'd gotten in college. "I told you not to play with her. You didn't listen. I warned you. She's not who she says she is. And neither am I." Darren dropped the phone, heart pounding. Maya picked it up without a word and walked away. That night he couldn't sleep. He searched everything, Maya's social media, her driver's license, her tax records. Something didn't add up. The photos, the bank wires, the mystery man, every lead vanished into a dead end. The more he searched, the deeper he fell into a web he hadn't even known existed. The woman sleeping under his roof wasn't the waitress from Belvedere's. She was something else entirely. By morning, Darren was calling in favors. Private investigators. Background checks. He paid a man $5,000 just to trace the wiring pattern in that overseas account. The results came back blank. Nothing. It was as if Maya had never existed before a year ago. But the man in the photo she cried over, he wasn't her brother. Darren knew that now. Because when he ran a facial recognition scan, one match came back. Lucas Hale. 10 years younger. Before the scar. Before the fame. And long before the betrayal. Maya had been in his life longer than Darren ever realized. She hadn't just walked into the bet. She had orchestrated it. Every move. Every look. Every step. But why? Why target him? Why marry him? And if Lucas was really dead, why would he leave behind a video like that, unless he knew exactly how it would all end? Darren tried to confront her again, but Maya was gone. No note. No clothes missing. Just vanished. And when he checked the security footage, the hard drive had been wiped. Clean. That was the night everything crumbled. 2 days later, police showed up at his door. "You need to come with us," they said. He asked why. They told him there was evidence. Of a murder. Of stolen funds. Of a conspiracy involving him, Lucas, and an unidentified woman. And now, here they were. In court. Maya returning with a blood-stained envelope and a chilling calm, placing it into evidence. The judge opened it slowly. Read it silently. And paled. Because inside was a handwritten confession. Dated 2 days before Lucas's death. It detailed everything, the dare, the fake marriage, the offshore accounts. And a final line that read, "If anything happens to me, it's on Darren. But if Maya hands this in, she's cleared. She deserves it. She earned it." Darren sat back, numb, as Maya walked past him without a glance, her heels echoing down the courtroom floor. The judge called for a recess, but Darren already knew. He'd lost. The game, the girl, and the truth. Because Maya had never been the pawn. She had been the one pulling strings. And he had walked straight into her trap. Darren Cole sat in the back of a transport van, wrists cuffed in front of him, his expensive shirt now wrinkled and stained with sweat, his brain still trying to process how a woman he barely knew had just turned his world inside out in front of a federal judge. The metal bench beneath him vibrated with every bump in the road as the vehicle rumbled toward the detention center. Across from him sat an officer who didn't bother to look up from his clipboard. Darren's mind flashed back to that first night again and again. The coffee shop. The bet. The wedding. The way Maya had smiled at the altar like she already knew how the story would end. He used to think he was the one holding the cards, but now it felt like Maya and Lucas had been playing him from the start. The video, the confession letter, the bank statements, all perfectly timed. All designed to destroy him. He wanted answers, but Maya had disappeared after delivering the envelope, vanishing like smoke after the flame. Inside the holding cell, Darren leaned against the concrete wall and stared at the camera in the top corner. He wondered if she was watching. If Maya had planned this long before Lucas ever made that bet. He hadn't even known Maya 6 weeks ago. But 6 weeks was long enough to ruin a life. Long enough to stage a marriage, embed herself into his world, and walk out with the one thing Darren valued more than his money, his control. The next morning, his court-appointed lawyer arrived, a tired-looking man named Sloan who wore cheap shoes and carried a stack of documents. "The letter changes everything," Sloan said.
The confessions from Lucas Hale. The blood matched his DNA. But it doesn't make you innocent. In fact, it paints you as a co-conspirator. Darren demanded to see the letter again. He read it twice. Lucas's handwriting, signature, and that final chilling line, "If anything happens to me, it's on Darren." Darren told Sloan about the bet, the dare, the wedding. He described Maya's change in behavior, the mysterious man at the coffee shop, the money transfers. Sloan scribbled notes but looked unimpressed. "This Maya, did you ever run a background check?" Darren shook his head. "It was supposed to be a joke," he said. "A 30-day stunt." Sloan sighed. "Well, now it's a federal case. You're being investigated for fraud, conspiracy, and possibly murder if they find proof Lucas is dead." Darren grabbed his collar. "He is dead. They found his body." But Sloan didn't flinch. His body was never recovered. Just a boat, a few drops of blood, and a pair of shoes. Darren felt cold spread through his chest. If Lucas was alive, then this whole thing was a setup. But if he was dead, really dead, then Maya wasn't just a pawn. She was an executioner. Meanwhile, across the city, Maya walked into a small apartment above an antique bookstore. It was bare except for a table, a laptop, and a box she pulled from the closet. She opened it carefully. Inside were photographs, old, creased, and marked with names and dates. Lucas at 18. Lucas and Darren at Stanford. Lucas with a woman, her mother. Maya stared at the photo for a long time. She had been waiting for this moment for years. When she was a child, her mother had worked as a legal aid for Hale Industries, the company Lucas and Darren co-founded before it went public. She remembered overhearing late-night calls, arguments about stolen patents and buried lawsuits. Then came the day her mother went missing. One day she left for a meeting at Hale HQ and never came home. Police ruled it a suicide. Maya never believed them. Years later, she dug into the case. Found sealed files. Gag orders. Hushed payouts. All leading back to Lucas and Darren. She tracked Lucas for months. Found patterns in his movements. Then, one night, she followed him to a bar and waited. That's when she saw Darren for the first time. That was the night the bet was made. Maya hadn't planned on being their target. She had planned to get close. But they chose her first. The timing was perfect. She went home that night and pulled out the folder she had been building since she was 16. Photos. Emails. Hidden camera footage. She added one new page, marriage certificate. Step 1, complete. But it wasn't just revenge she was after. Maya wanted the truth. About her mother. About what Lucas and Darren had done. She started recording every conversation with Darren, storing backups in the cloud. She followed Lucas too, watching him spiral as the company fell under SEC investigation. He had secrets, she knew. He was scared. And scared men make mistakes.
One night, Lucas showed up drunk at her door. He thought she was just the wife Darren had picked to win a game. He started ranting about betrayal, about the company, about someone named Keller, an old investor who had died under suspicious circumstances. Maya recorded everything. Lucas passed out on her couch, mumbling about a vault. When he left, she followed him and saw him meet someone in a parking garage. She took a photo of the license plate. It traced back to a holding company tied to Hale Industries. She was getting close. Then Lucas disappeared. The news said he drowned in a boating accident. But Maya didn't buy it. Not until she received the USB drive. No return address. Just a silver flash drive with a video labeled Play Me. It was Lucas. Bruised. Scared. Saying if anything happened to him, Darren would be responsible. That Maya needed to finish what they started. It was a confession, but also a warning. Lucas knew he had crossed someone. And he wanted Maya to burn the whole empire down. So she did. Back in custody, Darren paced his cell like a lion in a trap. He called in favors. Hired new lawyers. He even tried reaching Maya through old contacts. Nothing. She had vanished like a ghost. Then came the subpoena. Darren was ordered to give up all documents related to Lucas, the bet, and their company's financial dealings. It was the first time he realized, this wasn't about the marriage anymore. This was about everything. The money. The history. The secrets buried behind boardroom doors. One night, a guard slipped him a letter. No name. Just a single sentence. You only lost because you didn't know the rules. Darren stared at the paper, heart racing. Was it Maya? Was Lucas still alive? And if so, why stage his own death? The next morning, Sloane burst into the holding room with breaking news. A body had been found. Male. Mid-30s. DNA matched Lucas Hale. The confession letter was now evidence in a homicide case. Darren's charges had changed. No longer just fraud. Now suspected accessory to murder. Bail denied. Across town, Maya stood by a pier, watching the coroner's van drive away. She held the last message Lucas had sent her, an email with no subject. Just a link to a file hidden in a cloud drive. Inside were contracts. Payoffs. A hidden ledger showing payouts to silence employees, bribes to foreign officials, and a final folder labeled McKenna, her mother's name. It contained court transcripts and a settlement agreement. Her mother had tried to expose a rigged IPO. Lucas and Darren had paid her off. When she refused to sign the NDA, she was declared unstable. The last memo was from Darren. She'll talk. Fix it. Maya knew then that her mother had been silenced. Maybe not by death. But by something worse. Discredit. Isolation. Disappearance. She took the files and sent them to the DA, the press, and every investigative reporter in the country. Then she made a choice. She walked into the federal building and asked to speak. To the lead investigator. She turned over her files, her recordings, her marriage certificate, everything. She didn't ask for immunity. She didn't cry. She told them the truth, or at least her version of it. Darren had made a bet. Lucas had backed it. She had played along. But she didn't kill anyone. She only exposed what was already rotting beneath the surface. And if that made her a villain, so be it. Back in jail, Darren received a visit from his new lawyer. The media had picked up the story. Investors were backing out. Stock was crashing. The company board had filed a motion to remove him permanently. His empire was collapsing from the inside. And Maya had gone viral. The waitress who brought down a billionaire. Her photo was everywhere. Some called her a scammer. Others called her a hero. But Darren knew the truth. She had won. Because she'd never been playing the same game. While he played to win a bet, she played to finish a war. The last scene of the week showed Maya sitting at a cemetery, laying flowers on an unmarked grave. A simple stone read M. McKenna. She didn't speak. Just sat in silence, tears finally breaking free after all the years. Not for Lucas. Not for Darren. But for everything she had lost. And everything she had reclaimed. She took one final breath and whispered, "I kept my promise." Then she walked away. 3 days after Maya's testimony shook the federal court, a man with a limp boarded a midnight bus heading west. No ID, no luggage, just a hood pulled low and a bandage wrapped around his ribs. The driver didn't ask questions, the cameras didn't catch his face, but Maya recognized the shoes when she saw the footage broadcast on a small TV in a laundromat. The grainy screen showed a man at a gas station limping heavily, buying painkillers and an energy drink and walking out with the same leather boots she had last seen on Lucas Hale. Her chest tightened, not with fear but confusion. Lucas was supposed to be dead, DNA confirmed, coroner certified, but the man in the footage moved like him, hunched like him, and even scratched his shoulder the same way Lucas always had before lying. Her hands trembled as she hit rewind again and again while the news anchor droned on about conspiracy theories and the mystery man seen near an abandoned military dock. Maya had buried her past. She'd gone to the grave with her mother's memory, but now it felt like the past was clawing its way back from beneath the soil. She left the laundromat and went straight to her storage unit, a dim box beneath the overpass where she had stashed everything after Darren's arrest: the files, the drives, the backup phones. But this time she pulled out something she had never touched, a small metal key with a red tag and one word scratched into the surface: Hale. Her mother had left it in a book spine, the last birthday gift Maya had ever received. She never found what it opened, but now it pulsed in her hand like a clue, finally screaming to be heard. Meanwhile, Darren sat in the maximum security wing of a federal facility, rage curling in his gut as the guards ignored his shouts. His lawyer had stopped visiting. The news reports had labeled him disgraced former tech mogul under investigation for conspiracy, fraud, and now possibly staging the death of his co-founder. He knew he was losing, but he also knew something Maya didn't. Lucas wasn't just capable of faking a death, he'd done it before in college during a high-stakes hazing scandal. Lucas had vanished for a month, resurfaced with a forged medical record and a sympathy campaign that made him untouchable. Darren had helped cover it up, but now it made him wonder if history was repeating itself, and this time Lucas was playing both sides. He demanded access to the prison library and wrote a letter by hand, not to a lawyer, not to Maya, but to a journalist named Elise Chong, who once exposed a senator for insider trading. Darren had met her at a gala 2 years ago, and she had promised him one thing: if you're ever the villain of a story and the other guy looks too perfect, call me. Darren scrawled the truth, every detail: the bet, the wedding, the fight, the blood on the dock, the missing footage, and finally the one question that haunted him. Why would a dead man need a burner phone? He mailed the letter and waited 2 weeks before the prison TV showed Elisa's face reading a statement: Lucas Hale may not be dead, and the woman who exposed Darren Cole may be the only person who can find him. Maya watched the clip in silence from a cafe in a border town just miles from Mexico, her mind racing. If Lucas was alive, then everything changed: the charges, the narrative, the revenge. What if she had just been another piece in Lucas's long game? What if he knew she'd go after Darren? What if he had counted on it? She remembered the night he came to her apartment, how drunk he'd seemed, how easily he spilled secrets. Now she saw the cracks. He had never been drunk, he had been testing her, and she had passed or failed, she wasn't sure. She left the cafe and drove to the last known address tied to the holding company Lucas used, an old farmhouse outside of Mariposa, dusty, locked, and surrounded by cameras. Maya picked the lock, slipped inside, and found it exactly how she expected: too clean, too perfect, like no one had lived there, but someone had staged a scene to be found. She wandered room to room until she reached the attic, and there in a metal box was the real horror: photos of her mother tied to a chair, blood on her blouse, eyes swollen shut, a date stamped in the corner that proved everything. The police had lied, her mother hadn't vanished voluntarily, she had been taken and someone had documented it. Maya dropped to her knees, shaking her throat tight with a scream that never came. This was no longer just revenge, this was war, and Lucas had started it long before she entered the picture. She took the photos, scanned them, and uploaded them to 5 different servers, then burned the originals in the farmhouse sink. She wasn't going to let her mother be erased again. That night as rain pounded the windshield, Maya drove north to find the one person who might have answers. Not Lucas, not Darren, but an ex-employee from Hale Industries who had disappeared 2 years ago under a fake name. She had tracked him through a forum where whistleblowers shared tips. His screen name was Dark Signal, but she had traced the IP to a trailer in Nevada. He opened the door with a shotgun, but Maya held up her phone, playing a clip of Lucas saying, "Your silence is the only thing keeping you alive." The man froze, lowered the gun and let her in. He told her everything: how the company had created a black fund to pay off regulators, how they buried early cancer cases tied to their wearable tech, how Darren had been the face but Lucas had pulled the strings. But the worst part wasn't the crimes, it was the way they erased people. Those who refused to play ball were made to disappear, not killed, always, not directly, but bankrupted, discredited, institutionalized, and sometimes tortured into silence. Like Maya's mother, the man gave her one final file, encrypted and locked with the password Lucas used in college, Prometheus. Maya cracked it in seconds, and what she found made her stomach turn: a video of Lucas himself torturing a man tied to a chair, forcing him to sign documents giving up rights to a new drug patent. The man's face was swollen, but Maya recognized him. It was her mother's old boss, the one who had testified against her in court. She left the trailer and called Elise. The journalist sent the files and told her the truth, everything, and then asked one question: "If I bring him in, can you protect me?" Elise paused, then said, "Bring him in and I'll make sure the world knows you were the only honest one." 2 days later, Maya boarded a private ferry headed for an island just outside U.S. jurisdiction. She had followed a tip from Dark Signal that Lucas had a safe house there disguised as a meditation retreat for billionaires. She posed as a wellness instructor, smuggled a camera in her necklace, and waited. By day she led yoga classes, by night she searched the cabins. Finally she found him shirtless, limping, smiling like nothing had ever happened. Lucas opened the door and said, "I was wondering when you'd catch up." Maya stepped inside, heart hammering, hands in her pockets, ready for whatever came next. Lucas poured wine as if they were old friends. He talked about legacy, about vision, about how Darren had become too greedy, about how she had been perfect for the plan but then ruined it by digging too deep. Maya listened, said nothing, then finally asked the question that haunted her: "Why my mother?" Lucas didn't flinch, because she was better than the rest, because she believed in truth, and that made her dangerous. Maya nodded, then reached into her coat, pulled out the USB with all the evidence and tossed it on the table. Lucas stared at it, then looked up just in time to see Maya raise a small pen-shaped device and press a button behind her. The villa door exploded open. Federal agents stormed in. Lucas reached for something, but they were faster, pinning him to the ground as Maya backed away, trembling, adrenaline crashing through her veins. Later that night, as she watched the news report that Lucas Hale had been captured alive, facing dozens of charges, the screen faded to her own photo: Maya Cole, survivor, whistleblower, the woman who took down an empire. She closed her eyes, thinking of her mother, thinking of the grave, the photos, the tears. She had nothing left to give except the truth, and finally the world was listening. Lucas sat alone in the gray-walled interrogation room, arms cuffed to the metal table, his lips still holding that faint, smug smile he had worn the moment the agent stormed in. Maya watched from the glass behind the wall, her hands clenched so tightly her knuckles were white. Elise stood beside her, silent, eyes fixed on the man who had fooled everyone. The agent inside the room finally spoke. "Tell us about Project Silence." Lucas leaned back calmly. "That depends on what you already know." Maya had spent the last 48 hours going through the hard drive she retrieved from Lucas's villa, and what she found was darker than she ever imagined. Project Silence wasn't just a fund or a cover-up, it was an entire system designed to erase threats, journalists, doctors, even politicians. It started with monitoring, collecting data on habits, weaknesses, addictions, then came pressure, financial blackmail, staged scandals, and finally, silence, either by force or manipulation. Lucas had been behind it all, not just running Hale Industries but shaping narratives across the country. But what made Maya's blood run cold was a folder buried deep, named June_1999. Her mother's name was June. Inside were surveillance logs starting from the year her mother disappeared, entries about meetings with pharmaceutical companies, whistleblower interviews, and then a final report marked threat level red. Days later her mother vanished. Maya read every line until she couldn't breathe anymore. Her mother had been silenced because she discovered that one of Hale Industries' wellness products caused neurological damage, and when she refused to back down, Lucas had made her the first test subject for Project Silence. Maya thought she knew pain, thought she had felt it all, but this was something else. Her mother hadn't died fighting, she had died forgotten, with the world thinking she ran away with a man and abandoned her daughter. Maya pressed her palm against the glass, now looking not at a criminal but at the monster who had shaped her life from the shadows. Inside the room the agents offered Lucas a deal: immunity for full disclosure, but Lucas only laughed, said immunity was useless when the real power wasn't in governments but in secrets, and if they wanted truth they'd have to ask better questions like who funded him, who protected him, who helped forge his death. Maya turned away. She didn't need more answers, not yet. What she needed was closure. That night she returned to the safe house where the drive had first been found and tore through the files again, hoping for anything that felt like her mother, something human, something real. Among the reports she found a password-protected folder named Songbird, the same name as the lullaby her mother used to hum to her before bed. Her hands shook as she typed the word, and the folder opened slowly, revealing a single video. It was grainy and old, dated 2 weeks before her mother disappeared. June sat at a table speaking directly to the camera, her voice steady, her eyes fierce. If you're seeing this, something's gone wrong. My name is June Cole and I'm recording this because I can't stay silent anymore. I've uncovered evidence that Hale Industries has been falsifying clinical data on their neural bands. They've known for years that prolonged use leads to memory loss and cognitive decay. I tried to speak up, but I've been followed, threatened, and now I think they're coming for me. Maya watched the entire video, frozen, tears streaming down her face. Her mother hadn't run away. She had fought until the very end and left this behind as proof, as hope, and now it was Maya's job to make sure the world saw it. She called Elise, who arranged for the video to be broadcast on national television. Within hours it spread like wildfire. The world saw June Cole's face, heard her words, and the public outrage exploded. Families who had used the products demanded justice. Former employees stepped forward. Lawsuits piled up overnight. But Lucas didn't flinch. In fact, when he saw the broadcast he smiled wider, said to the agents, I was wondering when she'd find that the agents were confused. Elise demanded what he meant. Lucas turned slowly and said, that wasn't just evidence, that was bait, and Maya took it exactly like I planned. The word struck like a hammer. Maya's mind reeled. What did he mean, bait? Why would her mother's message be a trap? Then she remembered something. The folder Songbird hadn't been on the drive at first. It appeared only after she connected it to the internet, which meant someone added it remotely, and if someone added it, then maybe Lucas had expected her to find it. Maybe he wanted the world to see it. Elise and Maya returned to the data team and ran a digital trace. Sure enough, the file had a hidden signature embedded in the code, not just from Lucas's old encryption system but tied to a secure beacon. A beacon that once activated sent a signal to an unknown receiver. Lucas hadn't just shared the truth, he had used it to send a message, and now someone out there knew where he was. Within hours the prison went into lockdown. 3 guards were found unconscious and Lucas was missing again. Maya stood in the corridor staring at the empty cell. Cameras had blacked out for exactly 93 seconds, just long enough for a team to extract him clean. No trace, no gunfire, no sound. She felt the floor beneath her tilt. What kind of man can fake his death, survive an international manhunt, and escape a federal facility twice? But the message wasn't done. The next morning Elise received a flash drive in the mail with a note that read, you wanted the truth, you got it. The drive contained coordinates and a map marked with X's across the globe, all linked to properties, offshore accounts, and hidden labs tied to Project Silence. The implications were massive. Lucas hadn't just built a business, he had built a global web, a silent war, and Maya had been the one to tear the curtain down. The media spun the story every hour. Public opinion now painted Lucas not just as a criminal but as something more terrifying, a ghost in the system, someone who could vanish at will and still control everything. But Elise had a different theory. She believed Lucas was dying. His limp had worsened, his complexion pale and drawn. Every video showed a man deteriorating, and what if everything he did was to build a legacy, one final performance before the end? Maya didn't care about legacy, she wanted him stopped, truly stopped, not captured, not escaped, but done. So she followed the map the drive provided, landing in a remote part of Croatia where an old psychiatric hospital had recently been bought under a fake name. Inside she found what looked like a research lab, computers, vials, charts, and among them a patient file dated 15 years ago listing her mother's name, June Cole. Status: subject terminated cause experimental neuroserum failure. Maya read the page again and again and then saw a second page, test results marked recent, and a new name, M. Cole. She staggered back. The serum wasn't just experimental, it was designed to mimic death, slow the heart, block neural activity. It meant Lucas had tested it on her mother and now had used it on himself and maybe others. Maybe this was how he faked deaths, maybe this was how he escaped, and now she was next. She called Elise, told her everything, and Elise said one thing, be ready, he's not done with you. And Maya knew she was right, this wasn't over, not until she ended it herself. She returned to the US under a new name, staying in safe houses, changing routes, never sleeping twice in the same bed. But then one night she found a package on her hotel bed, no return address, just a phone inside already ringing. She answered slowly and the voice on the other end said, "Hello Maya, I told you we'd talk again." It was Lucas' voice, weaker, slower, but still calm, still dangerous. He said, "You were the best part of my story, but now you've made me your villain, and I wonder, Maya, how does it feel to win when all it does is make you more like me?" Maya didn't answer. She ended the call, threw the phone into the sink and watched it burn. But she knew he was right about one thing: it wasn't about revenge anymore, it was about who she became next. And in that moment she made a decision, not to hide, not to run, but to face whatever came next.
The sky above Chicago was a cold gray as Maya stepped out of the black SUV, her breath sharp against the wind. She wore no disguise this time, no sunglasses, no hat. She walked into the federal building with her head high, clutching the one thing that had started it all: the original contract, the bet between Lucas and Darren, the same paper that turned her life into a lie. She handed it to the agent behind the desk, who read it, then looked up with a stunned face and asked, "Do you know what this means?" Maya nodded and said, "It means everything. I did was never about revenge, it was justice." 3 hours later Elise met her in a secure office, files spread across the table, maps, dates, names of people Lucas had paid off or eliminated over the years, each name a ghost, each one now exposed. Maya's hand trembled as she turned the last page, a list of unmarked graves found behind one of Lucas's properties in Vermont, shallow pits of truth buried under years of money and silence. One grave had no body, just a broken locket with the initials JC. Maya picked it up like a curse and whispered, "Mom." Elise said, "We're close, but he's still ahead. Every time we move he's already gone, like he's watching from the inside." Maya didn't speak. She knew what was coming next, a question they had both avoided: who helped him escape the second time, who knew every move before it happened. Maya had a theory, and she hated it because it meant the betrayal went deeper than she imagined. She opened her laptop and pulled up the visitor logs from the prison 2 days before Lucas's escape, and there it was, an alias used by someone Maya once trusted, Darren's former assistant Caroline. She had vanished after the trial, but now she had reappeared as someone else, and Maya knew she wasn't working alone. Caroline had been more than an assistant. She had once been Maya's friend, the one who warned her to stop digging, the one who gave her a burner phone after the wedding ended. Maya thought it was kindness, now she saw it was surveillance. She tracked Caroline to a private airfield in Nevada, where she boarded a jet registered to a shell company tied to one of Lucas's old accounts. Maya didn't hesitate. She followed using credentials Elise secured from an international task force. The jet landed on a remote island in the Pacific, one that didn't exist on most maps, but Maya had seen the coordinates before on the drive Lucas had mailed. She stepped onto the sand just after midnight, the jungle around her humming with insects and something else, drones, the kind Lucas loved to use, small, fast, quiet. Maya ducked low, moved through the brush until she saw it, a compound built into the cliff, lights, soft and blue, steel walls masked by trees, a place designed to vanish, but inside she knew Lucas was watching, waiting, and this time it would end for good. She climbed the rocks, found a side entrance, jammed the lock with a hairpin and slipped inside. The air was cold, too cold, and she realized the compound wasn't just a hideout, it was a lab. Rows of cryochambers lined the walls, most empty, some occupied. Faint beeping from machines filled the silence. In the back room she found Caroline tied to a chair, eyes wide, mouth gagged, bruises on her face. Maya rushed forward, but Caroline shook her head wildly, and behind them a door clicked shut. Lucas stood there, older, gaunt, but smiling as if nothing had happened. He said, "I knew you'd come, you were always the end of my story." Maya stepped in front of Caroline and said, "Let her go." Lucas raised a brow. "You still think you're the hero, don't you?" He moved slowly toward a console, tapped a screen, and suddenly images filled the room. Her mother, Darren, Elise, Caroline, and Maya herself, each one tagged, tracked, coded, every message, every move recorded, even the moment she stood on that dock with blood on her hands. Maya realized he hadn't just planned his escape, he had choreographed her journey. Every place she visited, every clue she uncovered had been part of his script. She looked at him and said, "Why me? Why any of it?" Lucas answered, "Because you are what they believe in, the waitress turned warrior, the face of justice, and now you'll become the proof that the system works even when it doesn't." Maya stepped back, breath shallow. "You used me." Lucas nodded and smiled. "You destroyed my enemies, you made me a ghost. Now the world fears a myth and I get to disappear forever." Maya's heart pounded. She looked at Caroline, whose fingers were twitching towards something on the floor, a small detonator. Maya caught the signal in her eyes and understood there was one thing Lucas hadn't planned for: loyalty, not fear, not obedience, but true loyalty. Maya moved fast, slamming the table into Lucas, who stumbled back. Caroline hit the detonator and alarms blared as lights flickered red.
Gas hissed from vents as backup systems failed. Maya grabbed Caroline, pulled her up and ran for the exit. Lucas yelled something but his voice was drowned in sirens. The chamber doors sealed shut one by one. Maya didn't look back. She didn't want to know if he made it out. She wanted to believe this was the end. They burst out into the jungle, flames beginning to rise behind them as hidden charges went off, set by Caroline before she was ever caught. A rescue boat waited just offshore. Elise had called in help once Maya's tracker went dark. They climbed in as the compound exploded behind them, black smoke curling into the sky. Maya sat in silence, wind in her face, Caroline beside her, eyes closed as if finally free. The boat captain said, "He's gone, right?" And Maya didn't answer because deep down she didn't know if Lucas was dead or just hiding again, but something in her changed. The next week was a blur. Federal agents interviewed her for hours. Elise published the final article, not just about Lucas or Darren but about the machine they built, how power twisted truth, how real justice was fragile and hard and cost more than people wanted to pay. Maya received letters from people around the world thanking her, calling her brave, calling her a survivor, but she didn't feel brave. She felt tired, empty, waiting for the world to slow down. At her mother's grave she placed the broken locket down and said, "I hope you know I did what I could." Then she stood up and walked away, not with anger, not with vengeance, but with peace, because for the first time in years the story wasn't controlling her anymore. She was writing her own. 3 months later, Maya stood on the stage of a quiet conference hall in Geneva, the world's media watching her every move, the lights hot on her skin, the hum of translation earpieces echoing around her, and yet she wasn't nervous, not this time. Behind her a large screen showed her mother's face, not the tired one from the old video, but a young smiling woman full of hope and fire. "This is where we begin," Maya said into the mic, "because my mother didn't die in vain, and neither will anyone else who was silenced by greed." The audience clapped, but she wasn't there for applause. She was there to finish what was started years ago. The nonprofit she and Elise launched was now fully active, a global watchdog organization using whistleblower testimonies and leaked corporate data to investigate corrupt systems. It was called Songbird, named after the very code that once acted as bait, now reimagined as a voice for truth. Caroline, now part of the board, stood beside her. Out of the shadows, her bruises healed but her past never forgotten. Elise managed the outreach, speaking at universities and policy summits, her words sharp but full of heart. Together they had built something that could never be erased. But the final loose end had not yet been tied, and Maya knew it still tugged at the back of her soul. Lucas Hale had vanished again after the island explosion. No body, no confirmation, just a crater of evidence and whispers. Some believed he died, some said he escaped into a private network through biotech fakes or neural cloaks. Maya had spent weeks hunting those rumors and found only fragments, encrypted bank movements, shell messages in forgotten servers, but nothing concrete until one morning she received a single white envelope in her mailbox, no return address, just her name in black ink. She opened it slowly, heart pounding, and inside was a single photo. It showed a small village in Iceland covered in snow, the northern lights flickering above the mountains. In the bottom corner stood a figure holding a cane, half-shadowed face almost unrecognizable, but Maya knew those eyes. Lucas, he was alive and he wanted her to know it. But instead of chasing him, she made a decision. She took the photo to the authorities, gave them every detail, and walked away because the story no longer needed her to end it. The world knew who he was, what he did, and now others would watch and wait and expose, and Maya could finally live not as a weapon or a target but as herself. She moved to a quiet coastal town in Oregon, a place with foggy mornings and coffee shops that remembered your order. She started teaching again, not law but critical thinking. She told her students, never trust a single version of truth, always question, always verify. Some days she still checked the locks twice, still looked over her shoulder, but less and less as time passed. She began painting again, something her mother used to love, wild colors, emotion over form. She found her mother's old brush kit in storage and used it like a ritual, healing piece by piece. Then one day while walking the cliffs she saw a little girl building a rock tower by the edge, her father watching nearby. The girl turned and waved at Maya, and in her smile Maya saw something familiar, not from a file or a court or a war room but from a memory of her mother kneeling in the garden humming while planting sunflowers. Maya waved back, and for the first time in years she didn't feel haunted, she felt whole. Later that night she wrote in her journal a letter she never planned to send. Dear Lucas, she began, I understand now what you tried to do. You believed power could rewrite fate, but fate doesn't belong to those who hide, it belongs to those who rise after being broken. You made me question everything, but in the end you gave me the one thing you never had, freedom. And then she closed the journal, locked it away, and watched the tide come in through the window. Across the world new investigations opened, arrests were made, whistleblowers found safe harbor under Songbird's protection, and slowly the machine Lucas built began to crack. But Maya no longer watched every headline. She had done her part, she had spoken her truth. Now it was time for others to carry the flame. And so the story ended, not in fire or gunshots but in soft moments, truth spoken, healing begun. The girl who once served coffee to strangers, who became a pawn in a cruel bet, who buried her mother with no answers and faced the devil with nothing but grit and grief. That girl became something more, not a victim, not even a hero, just a woman who survived and dared to rise anyway. Because sometimes losing everything really is the only way to find who you truly are.